In today's video, we'll look at the stories of foreign nationals who were executed in the United States, often without help from their consulates. We will look into their crimes and the consequences of their execution. Hombberto Leal Garcia. Hombberto Leal Garcia, Jr. was a Mexican national who was sentenced to death in the U.S. state of Texas for the May 21, 1994. Hombberto Leal Garcia, born in Monterrey, Mexico, had lived in the United States since childhood. At age 21, he was arrested and charged with the abduction, rape, and murder of 16-year-old Adria Ceseda. According to court records, Adria Ceseda had attended a party where she became intoxicated and was reportedly assaulted by several attendees. Later that night, Leal encountered her, took her from the location, and sexually assaulted her again. Her body was found the next day. Evidence showed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and a large stick had been forcibly inserted into her body. Leal's bite marks and other forensic evidence linked him to the crime scene. In 1995, Leal was tried in a Texas court. He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. After his conviction, it emerged that Leal had not been informed of his right to contact the Mexican consulate, as guaranteed under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, a treaty accepted by the United States. This oversight placed Leal's case under the scope of the 2004 International Court of Justice ruling in the Avena case, which stated that the U.S. had violated the consular rights of 51 Mexican nationals. However, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that no law yet existed to enforce the ICJ's ruling, and the execution could proceed. On July 7, 2011, Hombberto Leal Garcia was executed by lethal injection in Texas. He was 38 years old. Jesus Ledesma Aguilar. Jesus Ledesma Aguilar was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in Texas State Court for the murders of Annette and Leonardo Chavez. Senior Jesus Ledesma Aguilar was born in Mexico and lived much of his life in the United States without legal immigration status. In June of 1995, Aguilar was accused of committing a cold-blooded double murder. The victims, Leonardo Chavez and his wife Annette, were fatally shot in their home. According to investigators, Aguilar had a long-standing grudge against Leonardo, a relative by marriage, after Chavez allegedly reported Aguilar to immigration authorities years earlier. Armed with a handgun, Aguilar broke into the Chavez home and shot both victims multiple times at close range. One victim was killed instantly, while the other died shortly after being transported to the hospital. Following a multi-agency investigation, Aguilar was arrested and charged with capital murder. Ballistics evidence, witness statements, and other forensic details linked him to the crime. Aguilar was convicted in Texas State Court and sentenced to death in 1995. As a Mexican citizen, Aguilar was entitled under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, VCCR, to contact the Mexican consulate after his arrest. However, Texas authorities failed to inform him of this right. The Mexican government intervened, arguing that Aguilar had been denied consular assistance that could have helped him secure a more robust legal defense. His case was included in the International Court of Justice's 2004 ruling in the Avena case, which found the U.S. in violation of international law for failing to notify 51 Mexican nationals, including Aguilar, of their rights. Despite appeals from Mexico, international organizations, Texas proceeded with the execution. Jesus Ledesma Aguilar was executed by lethal injection on August 14, 2006, at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Jose Ernesto Medellin. Jose Ernesto Medellin Rojas was a Mexican national and a serial killer who was executed by lethal injection for the murders of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena in Houston, Texas. Jose Medellin, an 18-year-old Mexican national and self-proclaimed gang member, was one of 6 young men who encountered 2 teenage girls, 14-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 16-year-old Elizabeth Pena. The girls were taking a shortcut home when they crossed paths with Medellin and his gang, known as the Black and White. The gang dragged the girls into the woods, where they were repeatedly raped, tortured, and ultimately strangled to death. The bodies were found 2 days later. In 1994, Jose Medellin was tried and convicted of capital murder. He was sentenced to death. His execution drew international attention due to a legal controversy concerning the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations 5 CCR. As a Mexican citizen, Medellin had a right under the Vienna Convention to contact his consulate after arrest. But at the time of arrest, his right was not mentioned. And because of this, the Mexican government took the United States to the International Court of Justice. The ICJ ruled that the U.S. violated international law by not notifying the consulate. But the U.S. Supreme Court later ruled that international treaties weren't enforceable unless Congress passed a law, and Texas refused to stop the execution. Despite the ICJ ruling, Texas proceeded with Medellin's execution. Jose Medellin was executed by lethal injection on August 5, 2008. Carl and Walter Legrand. Carl and Walter Legrand were sentenced to death because of a murder during a bank robbery. Carl and Walter Legrand were brothers, born in Germany but raised in the United States. In their late teens and early 20s, both struggled with criminal behavior, drug use, and unstable employment. On the morning of January 7, 1982, the Legrand brothers entered a branch of the Valley National Bank in Tucson with a .38 caliber revolver and a kitchen knife to rob the bank. During the robbery, bank manager Kenneth Hartsock attempted to resist. In the process, he was stabbed multiple times by Walter Legrand. Another employee, Larry Pritchard, was also attacked but survived. The Legrands fled the scene with less than $200 in cash. They were quickly apprehended based on witness descriptions and physical evidence. In 1984, the brothers were tried separately in Arizona State Court. Both were convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, and aggravated assault. They were sentenced to death. Years after their convictions, it came to light that neither Carl nor Walter Legrand had been informed of their right to contact the German consulate. The German government filed a lawsuit against the United States at the International Court of Justice, ICJ, seeking a delay in the executions and enforcement of consular rights. The International Court of Justice issued a stay of execution in Walter Legrand's case. Carl Legrand was executed by lethal injection on February 24, 1999. Walter Legrand was executed 1 week later, on March 3, 1999, using the gas chamber. Stanley Falder. Joseph Stanley Falder was the first Canadian citizen to be executed in the United States since 1952. He was convicted of murdering Inez Scarborough Phillips, a 75-year-old woman, in Texas in 1975 during a robbery in her house. Stanley Falder was born in Jasper, Alberta, Canada, in 1938. He moved to the United States in the 1970s and had a history of prior criminal offenses, including burglary and theft. On April 8, 1975, Falder entered the home of 75-year-old Inez Phillips, a wealthy widow living in Sulphur Springs, Texas. Falder had previously worked for the Phillips family and knew of the victim's wealth. Armed with a metal wrench and a stun gun, Falder attacked Inez Phillips, striking her multiple times in the head and suffocating her with a plastic bag. He stole jewelry and cash from the residence. Falder was arrested in Arkansas 2 weeks later. A thumbprint left at the crime scene and possession of stolen items linked him to the murder. He confessed to the crime during police interrogation. Falder was convicted of capital murder in 1977 and sentenced to death. As a Canadian citizen, Falder should have been informed of his right to contact the Canadian consulate under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which did not happen. When the Canadian government became aware of the matter, the government, Amnesty International, and even Pope John Paul II all called for clemency, or at least a stay of execution. When the violation came to light, the case drew attention from the Canadian government, Amnesty International, and even Pope John Paul II, all calling for clemency, or at least a stay of execution. On June 17, 1999, Stanley Falder was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He was 61 years old. His execution strained diplomatic relations between the United States and Canada. Mir Ali Kansi. Mir Ali Kansi was a Pakistani national who was convicted of the 1993 shootings at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Mir Ali Kansi was born in 1964 in Quetta, Pakistan. In 1991, he entered the United States on a business visa. Settling in Virginia, he began working as a courier. On the morning of January 25, 1993, Kansi drove to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. As CIA employees waited in their cars at a red light, Kansi pulled out an assault rifle and began shooting at the occupants. 2 CIA employees were killed, and 3 others were injured. After the shooting, Kansi fled the scene and boarded a flight to Pakistan. For nearly 4 years, he evaded capture, hiding in the rugged tribal regions near the Afghan border. The FBI placed him on its top 10 most wanted fugitives list. In 1997, a joint FBI-Pakistani operation captured Kansi near Dera Ghazi Khan. He was secretly handed over to the United States. During the trial, Kansi confessed to the shootings. He claimed he was angry at the U.S. foreign policy towards Muslim countries. Mir Ali Kansi was found guilty of capital murder and attempted murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. On November 14, 2002, nearly a decade after the attack, Kansi was executed in Virginia. Kansi's execution led to significant protests in Pakistan, with government officials and religious leaders condemning the act. His funeral was attended by high-ranking Pakistani officials, and he was buried in his hometown, Angel Francisco Brard. In 1992, Angel Francisco Brard, a citizen of Paraguay, was convicted of the rape and capital murder of Ruth Dickey. Angel Francisco Brard was a Paraguayan national born in 1960. He came to the United States in the late 1980s and settled in Arlington, Virginia. On January 23, 1992, Brard entered the apartment of Ruth Dickey, a 39-year-old woman and a former neighbor. He claimed he was there to talk. Brard sexually assaulted and murdered Ruth Dickey. He was arrested shortly after. Brard confessed to the crime. In 1993, he was convicted of capital murder and rape and sentenced to death. But a major legal issue emerged Brard had not been informed of his rights under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Under international law, foreign nationals arrested abroad must be informed of their right to contact their home country's consulate. In Brard's case, this did not happen. Paraguay filed a case against the United States at the International Court of Justice, CJ, arguing that his rights were violated. The ICJ requested a delay in execution, but the U.S. Supreme Court refused, citing procedural reasons. On April 14, 1998, Angel Francisco Brard was executed by lethal injection in Virginia. His execution triggered global criticism, especially from international law experts, human rights organizations, and Latin American governments. Javier Suarez Medina. Javier Suarez Medina was executed by lethal injection on 14 August in Huntsville, Texas, for the murder of a police officer during a drug deal. Born on June 17, 1969, in Piedras Negras, Mexico, Javier Suarez Medina moved to the United States at the age of 3. Growing up in Dallas, he attended local schools, but eventually dropped out of high school. On December 13, 1988, Dallas police officer Lawrence Cadena, a 17-year veteran of the force, was conducting an undercover drug operation. Posing as a buyer, Cadena arranged to meet with suspected drug dealers at a local convenience store parking lot. During the operation, Cadena was approached by Javier Suarez Medina, then 19 years old, who handed him a bag purportedly containing cocaine. Suddenly, Medina pulled out a Tec-9 semi-automatic weapon and shot Cadena multiple times at close range. Despite immediate medical attention, Officer Cadena succumbed to his injuries. Medina was apprehended at the scene after being shot and wounded by another undercover officer. Medina stated that he believed Cadena was a rival drug dealer and that he had been instructed to retrieve the drugs after the transaction. In May 1989, Medina was convicted of capital murder by a Dallas County jury and sentenced to death. The Mexican government argued Medina's rights under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations had been violated. Despite appeals from Mexican President Vicente Fox and other international figures, the U.S. The Supreme Court declined to stop the execution. On August 14, 2002, Javier Suarez Medina was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final statement, Medina apologized to the Cadena family, expressed remorse for his actions, and thanked the people of Mexico for their support. Manuel Martinez Coronado. Manuel Martinez Coronado was a Guatemalan mass murderer convicted for the killing of 7 people on 17 May 1995. Manuel Martinez Coronado, born around 1964 or 1965 in Guatemala, was a member of the Chortí ethnic group and worked as a peasant farmer. He lived a modest life in the village of El Pomar, where land disputes were not uncommon. In May 1995, Coronado, along with his stepfather, Daniel Arias, confronted the Arias family over a long-standing land dispute, eventually killing Juan Bautista Arias, his wife, Rosalbina Miguel, their children, Francias, 12, Jovita, 8, Arnoldo, 5, Anibal, 2, and Juan's sister, Emilia Arias, 68. A young boy, the sole survivor, later identified Coronado as one of the assailants. Coronado was arrested and charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder. His stepfather, Daniel Arias, was also apprehended. Arias received a 30-year prison sentence, while Coronado was sentenced to death by lethal injection. On February 10, 1998, at 6 a.m., Coronado's execution was carried out at Pavon Prison. Amnesty International and other human rights groups condemned the execution, citing concerns over the fairness of Coronado's trial.